All right, well, I think that we'll go ahead and get started. So excited for this session today. My name is Keisha Nicole Knight. I am the Director of Funds and Advocacy at the International Documentary Association, and we're really thrilled to be partnering with BADWEST to host this panel on Black women's wellness, which for those of you who couldn't join us in person will be available on our YouTube channel as well to kind of keep the conversation going there. So I'd like to start by introducing our moderator today. Our moderator is Tiffany Judkins, and Tiffany is an accomplished producer and filmmaker whose work has appeared on PBS, Discovery, and ABC. She is currently directing and producing The Pros and Cons of Comedy, and Tiffany is a 2016 Black Public Media Fellow, 2018 Arts for Los Angeles Fellow, and a co-chair and curator for the Black Association of Documentary Filmmakers, BADWEST, our partner in this teach out. And Tiffany is the founder of Kinship Filmworks, a production company specializing in socially impactful commercials and documentaries. So I'm going to turn it over to Tiffany to lead us through the panel today. I also just want to encourage you to drop questions in the chat, to introduce yourselves in the chat. We'll be circling around and taking questions at the end. So Tiffany, with that, I will pass it over to you.
Hello, thank you all for coming. Keisha, IDA, thank you so much for this platform and helping us put this together. I feel like this is going to be a great talk. If I could make a nod back to the flyer that was up just before this, it listed another filmmaker, Deborah Wilson. Deborah Wilson made a film called The Lucky Ones, and it's about mental health. She couldn't make it today, she had a shoot, but BADWEST will be showing her film on Monday, June 26th. Taylor, I just took you in my mind. I'm going to slow down talking. So hopefully you guys can join us Monday, June 26th for that film. But today we are lucky to have our filmmakers with us and our Black women's wellness expert. That's you for today, Jan. We have Janette Robinson-Flint. She's a founding member of Black Women for Wellness. Jan is currently the executive director. Her work in the health field began as an advocate during her pregnancy, seeking a holistic practitioner to work with her concept of gentle birth. An alumnus of University of Southern California, her journey has included the Birthing Project, USA, Los Angeles, Great Beginnings for Black Babies, National Health Foundation, March of Dimes, California Primary Care Association, Inglewood Healthy Mothers and Babies, South LA Health Project, and Women, Infant, and Children, South Los Angeles Advisory Board programs. Magic Through Radio is yet another love, having produced day-long specials celebrating the lives of African-American leaders and weekly programs highlighting women's voice with Talking Book, African World News, Family Tree, Some of Us Are Brave, and Liberated Sisters radio program, a victory that encourages health for women and girls ground her through the struggle for freedom. But thank you for being here, Jan Robinson-Flint.
Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, sure. I also want to just read Elizabeth Gray Bayne is an impact filmmaker who combines her background in public health with storytelling, art, and design to create community-based documentaries. Her work focuses on health and social issues in marginalized communities, especially those affecting women and girls. She enjoys partnering with local nonprofits and health organizations to develop films and public education campaigns that motivate and inspire social and behavioral change. Past collaborators include the LA County Department of Public Health, MIT Media Lab, the National Medical Association, and the National WIC Association. Elizabeth, thank you for being here today.
I should have also added Black Women for Wellness. Black Women for Wellness, Jan's nonprofit, was one of the first organizations I was able to partner with and create content for after film school. So I'm really excited to be on a panel with Jan today.
Yeah, we're coming full circle here. Okay, and then we have June Cross, a New York City native, won a 2020 Peabody Award for Whose Vote Counts, a PBS Frontline documentary, co-produced with Columbia Journalism School Investigations and USA Today Network. Her documentaries explore the intersection of race, public health, and politics. Wilhelmina's War from 2015 told the stories of a family living with HIV in the rural South. It aired on PBS's Independent Lens and was Emmy nominated. Cross also directed a documentary about post-Katrina New Orleans, covered Haiti, and explored class in Black America. She founded a documentary program at Columbia Journalism School in 2010. In 2003, she executive produced a 6-part series about African-American faith. She is best known for an award for an Emmy-winning documentary about how race and kinship played out in her own family, Secret Daughter, in 1996. A book by the same title was published in 2006. She has worked for Black Side Incorporated, PBS NewsHour, and CBS News. Thank you so much for being here, June Cross. Still.
Oops, sorry, thank you. Although I feel very old listening to that. But thank you.
Very accomplished. Well, welcome everyone. I want to start out with Jan. Jan, today we're going to be talking about a few issues in particular, Black maternal health and HIV. You've been working in this area of Black women's wellness. Can you kind of let us know where we are in 2023, why these films need to be made, why Black women kind of stand out in these areas? I'll turn it over to you.
That's a lot of questions in one question. So to talk about where we are, someone said greetings from Tonga, the land of the Tonga people, because that's where we are in Los Angeles. And in Los Angeles this year, in 2023, 5 women have died giving birth, 5 Black women. And the data around Black maternal health, and that means how many Black women die giving birth, is absolutely astounding. It is 247% more than white women. It is at a rate of about 11 per 100,000. So the rates of women giving birth who die are measured by every 100,000 women who give birth. And the rate of infants who die before their first year is measured by every 1,000 births. So both of those data points are a health disparity or a health inequity for Black women and infants. And there's no reason for it. There's absolutely no reason for it. In 2023, we have all type of medical technology to save the lives of women and babies, but the challenge is they are simply not heard when they present with every issue or problem. So, and I say this also because if we look across financial status, if we look across education status, if we look across geographics, where you live, it's the same data. It is, you will have more luck if you are a cigarette smoking white woman surviving a pregnancy and a birth than if you are a married PhD living in a wealthy neighborhood and Black. That is the level of racism and sexism in this country. So with that said, the question becomes, well, what do we do about that? And how do we change it? And there are different ways or different tools in the chest about how do we go about this. And film is a big way that we go about this. This year, one of the films that is making rounds is called Birthing Justice. It was produced by a woman named Denise Pines. And it absolutely talks about policy. It talks about program. It talks about midwives. It has solutions as well as outlining the problem about giving birth in the US as a Black woman. And it's changing hearts because that's what we need to do. And that's what film does. We need to change the hearts and the minds of folks. It is not enough that they have information on the data. It is not enough that they have information on the stats. We need to change their heart and we need to change their minds. And that is one of the most powerful tools that film has and can do with Black women.
Does your organization use film in any way, Jan? Clips,
Well,
shorts, or any?
Yeah, so we had, like 3 screenings of Birthing Justice, where we had discussions and panels around what this film means. We are in the process of putting together, and I'm really excited about this, an animation film with some students from Cal State Los Angeles. And the animation is about the history of childbirth. So one thing we know about the history of childbirth is that the American Medical Association changed how women give birth to ease doctors' burden, right? It's like laying on a bed with your feet in stirrups is not the easy way to have birth, to give birth, right? So we are putting together this animation that goes back to the hieroglyphs on the walls of the temples in Egypt or Kemet and shows what a natural way that is that women can give birth. So we're looking at that. And we're also looking at another film called Birthing While Black, which really outlines some of the policy that we are working on to change the culture of giving birth for Black women in healthcare settings.
So all these films, we create a conversation with these films, right? And that's the beginning, that's the start. So Elizabeth is here with us today, and her film is called Chocolate Milk. Elizabeth, we're gonna show you, will you set up your clip? Tell us a little bit about your piece.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tiffany. And thank you for that very comprehensive introduction. I'm glad that I didn't have to say any statistics. Jan has them all memorized. So Chocolate Milk is a project that I started about 6 years ago when I first learned about the gaps between Black women's breastfeeding rates and other groups in the US. And the reason that it caught my attention is because breastfeeding actually protects against many of the health conditions that are disproportionately affecting the Black community. That includes diabetes, obesity, cancer, chronic disease. All of those things, if you are breastfed for at least 6 months, studies show that it reduces your risk of developing those conditions later on in life. And as a public health professional, that was really interesting to me. I didn't know what I was going to make, though. I thought I was just going to make a PSA encouraging Black women to breastfeed because maybe they didn't know about it. But when I started working with organizations and speaking with health professionals and speaking with families, I learned that it wasn't a lack of information that was creating this gap. It was the way that they were being treated in different health settings. And it's a pipeline of decisions that are kind of limited based off circumstance. And as I learned more about it, I learned more about Black maternal health and Black maternal mortality. But I knew that other folks would cover those stories. And so I decided to focus on the niche of breastfeeding, because at the end of the day, the solutions to encouraging Black families and providing support for Black families so they can increase their breastfeeding rates, they're going to be the same solutions to reducing the mortality rate that we're seeing for Black families. And that's support, that's empathy within the healthcare setting, is also making sure that people understand that you're not alone when you're giving birth. It is a community event, and that it is okay to ask for help and ask for support, and knowing where those resources are, whether it's a doula, a midwife, or just having a meal train where people are bringing over food and doing chores while you develop that bond with your baby. And so what we're going to see is a clip from Tammy. She was one of the women that I followed from her ultrasounds in her third trimester to her picking her daughter up from kindergarten. So I was with Tammy's family for 5 years, and she went into her story, her birthing, breastfeeding journey, wanting to do all the things that make you a good mom. And we see in real time how circumstances might affect those things that we think of as personal choice, but is it really a choice when circumstances are acting against you and making it very difficult to reach some of those goals? How was that?
That's good. Sergio, we're ready for the clip.
And she just lays here and drinks for about 10 minutes or so. If I'm up before her, sometimes I'll come back in the room and I'll sit on the edge of the bed and just use a pillow or a nursing pillow. So this is our early morning routine. Tiku, 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 tiku. Come on. Let's get up. 1, 2, 3. I think you need your diaper changed. Let me check. Let me check it. I moved to Inglewood 2 days before my birthday. It was pretty sudden. My landlord don't think he liked the idea of me being there with a baby. He was okay with it, but I guess, maybe he had a change of heart. Let's see what you can wear today, because the temperature, I think it's supposed to be hot. My last day at work was April 8th, and I went back July 25th. I did not use the full amount of time. I was scared I would lose my job. Let's see. So we got that. This is cold. Let's combine that. That's a bottle, 2, 3. So that means we need to get you some formula. She was reintroduced to formula at about 4 months. She would only have formula if she didn't have enough breast milk bottles. It wasn't ever a time where she was just all formula. There was a period where I was only breastfeeding, and that was during my leave. And maybe the first 2 months I was back to work.
I'm here. Hey, okay, Elizabeth, tell us about why you picked that clip and why that's a great representation of the film, and also how you're representing we speak in your film. We see 4 mothers.
There's 3 women who I focused on their stories, but there are also additional families who they're providing services to, who we also will, we kind of follow their stories a little bit as well. And in this clip, the reason I chose this one, this was a turning point for Tammy. Up until then, all of her conversations had been about her goals and why she wants to breastfeed and how she wants to be all natural. And she even wanted to have, she talked about wanting to have a natural vaginal birth. But Tammy ends up having to have an emergency C-section because she develops preeclampsia. She is not able to nurse immediately because her milk isn't coming in and she gets nervous, and her mother flies in to help her, but her mother did not breastfeed any of her children. So she doesn't have that background to really assist. And so she lacks the family history. She isn't able to give a natural birth in the hospital. And because of the C-section, she's prone, her hands are numb, so she can't even hold her baby. Like, just everything does not go the way Tammy expected. And on top of that, she's forced to move right after bringing a new baby home. She's told initially into her pregnancy that she's going to have the full maternity leave, but she gets that kind of light pressure from work where they don't say it directly, but they imply that if she takes the whole time, maybe her job won't be there. And so, and also on top of that, her relationship with her partner ends. And so this is like a perfect storm of everything. And so later in the clip, Tammy talks about going through postpartum depression, but not having the time or the resources to get support for that. And so she, you know, we follow her the whole time. So we see how she's able to surmount these challenges, but it's a critical moment where we see things shift from what you envision to what your reality might hold. And that's why I wanted to show that. And folks in the the breastfeeding community, the human milk feeding community, they were troubled by this clip because they're like, well, why are you showing formula? But that, you know, and is that a success still, you know? But from what I learned, especially following Tammy's story, is that any amount of human milk you're able to provide your baby is a success. And so we don't think of combination feeding as bad. And combination feeding is when you do human milk and formula. Whatever you're able to provide for your baby, we consider that a success. And so we see Tammy come full circle and later in the film, but that's why I chose this particular clip. And also just because we tell mothers about what they should be doing to be good moms. And we judge them when they don't meet these expectations. But we hear her say in real time all of the challenges that she experiences. And it's not just for Black women, but it's harder because of our circumstances in this society. And just the idea that it's hard to nurse your baby, but that we're mammals. Like, we're supposed to be able to provide human milk for our babies. And the fact that societal circumstances make it so difficult, like the hypocrisy of it, that was why I wanted to use this particular clip.
Fantastic. I don't want to let too much more time in this hour go past without bringing in June. June, I say your film is like about HIV. I kind of set that up when I was talking to Jan, but your film is like Elizabeth, so much more. A lack of resources, poverty, systemic issues represented in both pieces. Will you tell us, set up the film, the clip that we're going to see? Okay, we're on mute.
Sorry. This is actually an excerpt of the pitch reel that I was using to fund the film. It took me 5 years to raise the money and complete this film. So I'm showing 2 minutes of the excerpt that gives you a sense of the three main characters. One is Vivian Clark Armstead, who's an activist, who I remember one of her memorable conversations with me was if we could fix all of the public health issues that cause Black women to die at a higher rate from HIV, we will have fixed racism in America. We will have fixed poverty in America because of all the different factors that would need to be addressed, from housing to undereducation to underemployment to, transportation problems, which result from all of those things. We'll also meet Wilhelmina Dixon, who's main character. She's a grandmother. When I met her, she actually had 5 people in her family living with HIV, each of whom had contracted the disease in various ways. There, at the time that I did this, everybody thought it was Black men living on the down low was the whole reason why there was HIV in the world, and that wasn't so necessarily. So we'll meet Wilhelmina, and we'll meet her granddaughter, Deshelle, who, when I started this film, was 13. She's now 26. She just had her 26th birthday. And she's been living with HIV her entire life, as she'll tell you.
Okay, let's do the clip, Sergio.
This state right now is investing very little in the saving the lives of African Americans impacted by HIV/AIDS. And so if you're waiting on the cavalry to come, if you're waiting on somebody else to come and save us, if you think the government coming, if you think help's coming, just think about Katrina. They ain't coming. So we gonna have to save ourselves, and we gonna have to save our children.
My name is Deshelle Dix. I had HIV for 15 years, all my life.
Well, they just gave it to me for her to die. She was so little, and she had turned like, I said, like if you got a chicken and you pick it and it starts to turn kind of a bluish, but she was so tiny.
Oh, you HIV positive, you gonna die today or tomorrow.
HIV, you don't hear too much about that around here, because if people got it, they're not gonna tell you about it.
What is this out here that you had stopped taking your medicine for a while? What happened?
I guess it was stress.
Stress?
Yeah.
You got depressed?
Yeah.
And they talking about depression. Depression is the worst thing you can have with it. But how can you get yourself straightened out with no home to go to sleep at night, just in the street? The medicine they giving you ain't worth a shoot. They might well let everybody that's got HIV die.
I guess I should mention also that I shot this film in South Carolina. And at the time I shot it, was just as Obamacare was being passed, and there was a huge political debate going on in South Carolina over whether or not to expand Medicaid. And everybody in Wilhelmina's family is on Medicaid. And in fact, had they expanded Medicaid in South Carolina, 25% of the state, not just Black people, but Black and white people, sorry, it's my cat, 25% of the population of South Carolina would be Medicaid eligible. So.
Well, that's infuriating. Jan, you want to jump in here? I feel like you do. Well,
it is so amazing to me, my two comments, right? One is the civil war that the United States is in is absolutely amazing. The way they have pitted white people against Black people to the point where they will cut off their own nose, they will spite their own face, is just amazing to me. And that is amazing in 2023, right? When we are looking at a former president who has been indicted, but all the folks that are running in that party are afraid to say anything because so many people are in his camp, right? That is the level of racism and the way of civil war in this country. And we absolutely need that movie, that narrative to begin to highlight the condition that we are in. And I also wanted to say, June, love your music. It's a man's world. James Brown.
James Brown was actually born in this part of South Carolina, so it was fitting.
Okay.
Yeah,
It wouldn't be nothing without a woman, right?
that's right. Ain't nothing without a woman or a girl.
A woman or a girl. I know the words. I was like, yes. But I love the way it builds. And I love the way that with movies, you can play on people's emotions with music as well as with the visual, right? So, yeah.
Okay, so the rural South, like looking at that, I believe you say it in when your film starts, June, that going back to South Carolina is kind of like going back in time. At least it is to people who live in big cities. And I mean, we watched that film and we're all just aghast, like mouths ajar. Unless you're from the South, and then you have that kind of relationship and it's not so shocking to you. So how does your film still live on? It was put out in 2015, 2016?
2015, yeah.
How do you give your film legs?
It's still being shown. HIV is no longer the #1 killer of Black women, I don't believe. I think that statistic has changed. But it is still a killer of Black women. And the issues that plague African Americans in rural parts of this country are the same, haven't changed. In fact, probably have gotten worse since 2015. Because of the gap between rich and poor that continues to widen in this country. And as Jan was saying, the way that there's like this guerrilla war going on, an undeclared civil war between white and Black in this country, when like white folks are as poor or not poorer than Black people in many parts of this country, and could be, if we could fix racism, we'd fix a lot of things. The reason that the women in Elizabeth's film face the issues that they face is because of racism, and like there was a study that came out, I think like a month ago, that even rich Black people have higher levels of infant mortality. And yeah, so it's like there's a Black tax.
There was a point I was on a panel a few years ago, and they were asking about why these inequities exist. And at first I was going to roll down the whole Rolodex of social determinants of health. Like, okay, where is housing and it's income, and it's education. And I was like, you know what? It's racism.
So the three of us agree on that. It is, if we fix racism, wow.
Else. So
can I ask a question about, can I jump in here? I know we're going to do the chat, but I just wanted to jump in here, which probably affects all of us, the issue of Black women in pain, how that's something that's ignored or not addressed, or they think that, Black women, we can, you bend whatever that you can deal with pain. Can we talk about that in the context of this discussion?
Is that pain? Is that empathy? Pain empathy? Is that a term for that?
So I want to go back to this issue of racism, because racism is so embedded into this country. It is absolutely embedded into the medical education system. So part of the racism in the medical education system is that Black people are less than human, right? That we can endure pain, that our skin is thicker, that we don't feel as much. And we've seen this play out in one of the stories I want to tell you about, I'll tell you two very quickly, was Serena Williams. She had to save her own life when she was having her baby. Why? Because they didn't listen to her about her pain and what was going on with her body, right? So yes, the racism that is embedded in the system teaches that Black people, Black women can endure more pain, that we don't feel pain. and we're less than human, so we don't deserve attention to our pain. I want to go back also into the issue of when they say the father of gynecology is Marion Sims, who performed many, over 60 surgeries on 3 Black women, Annika, Lucy, and Betsy in Montgomery, Alabama, with no anesthesia, none whatsoever. And this is what they have based their study of gynecology on. The pain that those 3 Black women, and probably more, endured from a white butcher, I'm not even gonna call him a doctor, to build their surgery on. So that's
so historically or systemically, it's one thing. Is the answer to just go out of the systems, to be doing this at-home births, to just community healthcare, like just all together?
Well, that was low-key what I kind of saw after 3 or 4 years of talking with folks who are health professionals in the birthing community. And that's why I made the decision, because initially I was going to focus on 3 women who had just given birth to see who was able to reach the 6-month milestone. And that would have probably been a little bit more palatable to like a streaming platform, but I couldn't omit the alternative. And so that's the reason that I decided to include a home birth midwife in the storyline, to kind of, in the subtext, hint at an alternative where you're not going to necessarily come up against some of those barriers, where they're going to rush you through the birthing process. They're going to administer medicine that is going to obstruct the regular flow of hormones that allow you to dilate fully. They're not going to rush you or coerce you into a C-section, which comes with its own complications.
So I want to go back to one of the things that I put in the chat is that our medical system, in addition to being racist, is a for-profit industry. We need to take the for-profit out of healthcare and healthcare delivery. So that's one change we need to make. We absolutely need to expand the healthcare industry to have more folks who look like us, more Black women, more Black men, but more people who have come from our lived experience of being Black in America, or even being Black globally. So we need to expand that pipeline in terms of getting more of us who are into that system. We absolutely need to take the for-profit out of medical care and medical service delivery, as well as education around health education, and absolutely begin to address, not even begin, but address the racism that is deeply embedded into every system in the United States.
I think it's, I'm sorry, go ahead, Tiffany.
I wanted to, we're here with IDA, we're documentary filmmakers, and I want to kind of keep this filmmaking frame around this conversation. So if we could go back, June, if you lead us, your approach to this story.
Yeah, that's actually what I was just getting ready to do. So I think part of the issue is the medical profession speaks a form of English that is not easily understandable, even to college educated people. I mean, I've spent most of my career studying public health, and I even have troubles with my doctors. My doctors don't always take me seriously. I don't always understand what the hell they're talking about. And one of the issues, one of the reasons that I wanted Wilhelmina to tell her own story in this film was because she is undereducated. She actually cannot read. She's underemployed. She literally had to pick peas in order to get gas money to put in a car. And yet she understood as much about the issues of HIV as any of the public health professionals that I was speaking to, who had all of this fancy language and 4-syllable words that they used to describe things. And after I had finished the film and Wilhelmina and I became friends, I remember taking her to one of these HIV conferences, and she would lean over and she was like, what's that, what they were talking about being when you take a PrEP, or if you take the pill that keeps your T cells at a healthy level. And she leaned over to me and she's like, what is that they're talking about? And they're like, I said, oh, it's the pill that you can take that keeps HIV from showing up in your bloodstream. And she's like, oh yeah, I know about that. So, once you explain things to people, but if you let us tell our stories in our own language, in our way, and give us the agency to analyze what's going on in our own lives, I think it helps a lot. And I think medical professionals need to hear our stories so that they understand what it is that they're hearing when we're trying to explain things that they otherwise might not take seriously.
I'd
So
like to piggyback.
looking at, you missed your appointment. Well, I missed my appointment because my car broke down, or I didn't have gas money, or there was no way for me to get from here to there because my son needed the car in order to go to work today. So therefore I didn't have a car. There's a whole bunch of things that go into people being non-compliant, as the doctors call it, besides just, I'm not going to do this. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't let you finish. I wanted to piggyback off of June's. That's the reason, June's comment, non-compliance, a lot of times it's in the stereotype is that it's willful and it's lack of care and maturity on the part of the patient. And that's why I wanted to follow the women's stories as opposed to having experts talk about the statistics. Because what I was noticing when I was doing my reading was that health professionals, nurses were misinterpreting the statistics. They would hear the statistics about, Black women not breastfeeding at a certain amount, and what they read into it is like, oh, they must not be interested. They don't care. They're not good moms. So I'm not going to waste my time walking them through the technique of latching and giving them those tips. Why waste my energy? That was how people were interpreting the statistics. And so I wanted to show in real time what women were going through. And what was interesting is I made the film available, like a really early rough cut available. And the biggest audience were health providers, white health providers wanted to see the film. And they were, and I hate when we have to say like, oh, we had to humanize this, because obviously we're human beings, but they needed to see folks struggling, to see that this was not a willful choice. Is life happening to them? And so I wanted to piggyback off June's comment, because that was why I wanted these women to be able to speak for themselves and like explain what their circumstances were, not getting paid enough, not having partner support, different pressures that limit their options.
I think the other thing, at least that Wilhelmina's War has done, Janette talked about isolation, and the biggest audience so far for Wilhelmina's War in the sort of screening world has been people who work with HIV patients in the rural South. They think it's only them because there's like one person for 10,000 people. And, to see that this is a shared experience and that we have similar ways of describing it, I think empowers us more within our own communities to organize, to figure out ways to form coalitions with other groups, and to have some degree of agency that can affect change.
One clip that I wasn't able to fit into the film that I loved so much was one of the mothers explaining how she kicked everybody out of her room. She kicked all the staff, the nurses, the doctors out because they were yelling and they were increasing her stress levels, and it was preventing her from being able to relax and dilate. And yes, having these conversations, like one of my favorite parts about this film was taking it to communities and watching the conversations that happen after the screening and the light bulbs go off, and people realizing that, oh, this is something I was embarrassed to talk about. And I'm not the only one experiencing it. And if this is an issue, what do we do about it as a community? And that's one of my favorite parts about this filmmaking process.
I want to say if anyone has a question to ask each other here, June to Elizabeth to Jan, please do so. And we're going to open this up to the audience shortly. So I know that your backgrounds are, we're talking about the approach to the filmmaking, but your backgrounds as individual filmmakers. Elizabeth, you're coming from public health. So I feel like that's your marching orders, right?
No, I was frustrated with public health. I was very frustrated with the academic world and the lack of progress addressing certain issues and the focus on statistics and preaching to people about what they should or should not be doing without really reflecting the reality of their lives. And I realized that at first that approach wasn't effective. And also there was the trickle down it doesn't happen. Like the information that they're spending millions of dollars to research and study, it's not getting to the communities that are being affected. And it was painful to watch them spend so many, like I worked for the federal government before I went to film school, and they would give grants and funding and awards to do research that never actually benefited the communities that they were studying. And also people don't make their decisions based off statistics and scare tactics. They make their decisions based off how they feel, how you're able to allow them to connect with the issue. And I realized that academia was not necessarily going to see the results that I wanted to see in my community. And so I came to LA to study film so I could learn how to tell a good story.
So which is what I meant is I feel like I could be wrong that your marching orders being, I want to make change through film and public health. Like you may pick other topics that are not related, but that's what I meant. Like you're like, I want to put all of that, the feelings to the statistics and really affect.
Yes.
Thinking. Yeah. And then June, you're coming from a journalism background. Can you talk about that?
Well, journalism, we're storytellers. I got interested in public health because I kept seeing the intersection of so many things and just telling a story. There was one point early on in the making of this film when the streamers hadn't really taken off as much as they had, but a prominent, one of the prominent cable stations said, well, wouldn't this film be better if it was like Wilhelmina went off and met these activists and they took over, and somehow had a victory at the end, like the hero, what we call the hero's journey story in journalism. And it's an oversimplification that has infected almost everything that we see in terms of documentary now. But I really had to keep pushing back on that and say, there's not, in journalism, sometimes you take on the system and you lose. Sometimes you take on the system and nothing changes. Sometimes you have small victories. My small victory in this film was there's a moment where Deshelle is slut shamed on Facebook and bullied by a group of girls in her school because they know she has HIV, and the trope is that you must be sleeping around if you got HIV. And so they've been writing these awful things about her on Facebook. And after they saw the film, she wrote me and she said, they apologized to me. They said they didn't understand how I had felt when they wrote those things, and they didn't understand my situation. And for me, that small victory I actually brought tears to my eyes. I mean, that was more important than having Nikki Haley decide to bring Obamacare to South Carolina. I mean, I would have loved to have Obamacare in South Carolina, but being able to change those 2 points of view was as important to me as that policy change. I'm not sure, we had an earlier off the, background conversation for those who just joined us on the call about the degree to which a film can change policy. And Elizabeth and I were sort of had a disagreement about this, and I was like, I'm not sure a film can change policy, but a film can change people's attitudes.
Elizabeth, it was save lives, right?
Save lives.
I
That
think it
was-
will save lives.
Okay, sorry.
But it had, and you never know what that ripple is going to be, if it's going to be big or small, but it's a ripple, and eventually it will circle around and change. I mean, my film, I did get nerdy, and I had some screenings where we had folks do a before and after survey to see if their minds were changed. But an unanticipated, effect was also organizations started asking women in the community to share their stories, just as how they do their service, like as in terms of how they serve the community. Now, like what I see more often is collecting images and collecting stories as part of their advocacy. And before, the emphasis was a lot more on the statistics. And so I can't take full credit for that, but that's definitely a shift that I've seen in years. And so you never know how your film's going to have an impact, but it does in surprising ways. And I love that anecdote that you shared, June, about just in her life, because like that's when because there's now a big push in filmmaking about the ethics and how does your film impact the participants who are sharing their lives on screen. And that's a beautiful impact. A lot of times it's not what we see. But that's amazing that it was able to like make that small shift in her life.
Yeah. And funding for these kinds of films. Elizabeth, is is it really like public health organizations, nonprofits? Is that
I applied to every film grant. I had a spreadsheet of 50 organizations, and I had a calendar, and I was applying and I was submitting, and I did that for a year. And my funders were a nonprofit arts organization and a major public health foundation. They were not because I was competing with so many different filmmakers who have much sexier topics that are much more salacious. And my little film about Black women in nursing and human milk, so I was glad that I was able to like connect with organizations and eventually meet a larger funder who could think outside the box. But yeah, it took 3 or 4 years for me to raise the funding and figure out who was the right person to ask. And when I did, they were like, oh, you should have asked sooner. So
June, what about you?
I think I mentioned it was 5 years. There was one summer when I wrote 15 grant applications. I got rejected from all of them. And there was a point where I was just going to take the hard drives and throw them in the Hudson River, I'll be honest. And right around that time, I met the guy that I'm now living with, who looked at my rough cut and said, you can't throw the hard drives in the Hudson River. You've got to go off and finish this film. This is a really important film. So we're still together. And I was able to find from somewhere. Well, I prayed on it. I'm a Buddhist. I chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. I really just attacked it with prayer and was able to make another go at it, and was able to get money from the Ford Foundation. Finally came in with my finishing funds, and the AIDS Healthcare Foundation helped me with post-production. So those were my last two big buckets. And when I was able to sell it to independent lens. So it was like those last three were able to get me across the line. But a lot of it is a lot of it is how are Black women portrayed and how are Black women expected to be portrayed by the people who show these films. And Jan, I'm interested in how you would use films like Elizabeth's and Wilhelmina's War or other films like that. How do you use film in your own work? Because a small audience sees it, wherever, and then we're trying to get other people to use it as well. But maybe you could address that.
Right. So sometimes, well, we use film in two different ways. And sometimes your audience is strategic, right? We filmed or screened Birthing Justice in Sacramento. And in Sacramento, the audience were people from California Department of Public Health. There were people, legislators there, and there were chief aides there. So rather than give them a book of data that they weren't going to read, or they were going to, read at their leisure at some point in time down the road, we have this film, we have a fact sheet, and we have a discussion. So when our bill hits their table or hits their desk, they are informed about it. So that's one way that we use film, and we absolutely did that. And we absolutely have passed policy in California with an informed staff of elected officials, informed elected officials, and importantly, the informed public health department also, who really will push your budget ask or push your policy also. That's one way, just in terms of the strategic audiences that we use. And then also, we still, in addition to Black Women for Wellness doing policy, we also still do programming, right? So we still have expectant folks who come together for a food distribution program, for diapers. We've had several health education programs where they can look at a movie and get it. I think some of the stuff that I have been putting in the chat is, it is important to decrease or break those barriers of isolation. Right? So you don't think your story is yours alone and blame yourself. And movies absolutely help to do that when we're talking and engaging with community, right? It is important that you see yourself well lit, right? Because this is what I appreciate about Black folks. They know how to light Black people so we look beautiful, right? And that is so important. So because that trope of Black women stereotype is just way too prevalent, and we don't get enough light. We don't even know how to ask for the light that we need sometimes when other people are filming us. So we use film with public health, with legislators and their staff, and we use it with community engagement. And I almost typed into the chat, no one is coming to save us, which is where you started, June, with the excerpt from your film. It's going to be us. No, there is no Calvary, no government coming to save us. Our filmmakers are critical to us saving us. And then to answer, I think Joyce put a question in the chat about Black providers. We absolutely need more Black providers, but we need Black providers who are coming with a community perspective and lived experience, because as I have shared and said before, that the education system is racist. It is that racism is deeply embedded, and we want to make sure that our community members that we send into that system to get their knowledge do not become so enveloped in it that they forgot where they came from. So, and for that reason, we have Black providers that are extremely effective. We have Black providers that have forgotten how to listen to us.
Jan, I thought that was a euphemism at first when you said about the light, we're not being lit well. And then I was like, oh, she really means it. So then you did turn it back into a euphemism. I saw well, I think earlier we were talking about the amount of doulas. Joyce, you had a question about the amount of doulas in respect to the maternal death rates. So is that like they're rising? Are we confident about this number, that things are changing? We need more? And I believe financial resources is an issue. Who can afford doulas? It's not a part of like a Medicaid or anything like that to have a.
It
sign?
is now.
Yes, tell us.
Well, I'm gonna go back to Black Women for Wellness passed the Mama Bus bill in California. So yes, in California, Medicaid recipients can get doulas. Now the question is, do we have enough doulas to make that happen? And right now we're still working on that. But that had been the challenge, that only women who could afford doulas had doulas. So we're working on it in California. And that's what I said, that's why these films are so important, because we did bring that legislative body together to show those movies, and those public health officials together to show those movies and say, this is why we need doulas. This is why we need this policy passed.
Mhm. Absolutely. June, talking about subjects directly speaking their experience.
Yeah, I was actually wondering, Elizabeth, how you found the women to agree to appear in your own film, because it's like bearing a breast, even though we're mammals and we're
It's natural.
part of human life. You do have to find women who aren't squeamish about that and who can talk about their own experience. Can you talk about how you found the women?
I'd love to, and this actually touches on our pre-conversation too. When I read about the issue, I wanted to immediately to how can I help? How can I be involved? And then I also realized, I'm going to have conversations with folks about their bodies. And how am I going to find someone who's willing to have that conversation with me? I can't just go on the street and say, hey, do you want to tell me about, I see you have a baby, you want to talk? And so I actually, I was very shy about this subject initially. And, but what I did do right is I reached out to organizations that were already working in that capacity. I introduced myself, I explained my intentions, and I asked them if they, about, whether they thought this might be beneficial and could they introduce me to some folks who might be willing to share their stories. And so those organizations trusted me enough to make those introductions. And I started my project just sitting in women's kitchens and living rooms and having them share their birthing journey with me and their breastfeeding journey with me. And that kind of got me a little bit more acclimated and more comfortable with the conversation. And most of the women I talked to, they were happy to be asked. No one had ever asked them before.
Wow.
And they didn't, and the idea that other women would watch their clips on YouTube and find benefit from watching that and community from watching those stories. That encouraged me to continue, and that maybe it wasn't so strange a conversation to be having. I think, did that answer the question?
How many women did you talk to before you settled on the 3 that are in the film?
I thank you for these questions, June. So I conducted 40 ethnographic interviews with moms around the country. And finally, I found Tammy actually in an acting class that I was in. She had to discontinue taking classes because she was pregnant. And it took me a few weeks to go I could ask Tammy, she's so great on camera. She's very energetic. And I had no idea what her story was going to be, but she was willing to open up to me and share her life. And Lydia was a staff member of one of the organizations that I initially reached out to. And I met Rashad because one of the moms that I initially interviewed, she was shy about having the camera in her home because we all want to put on our best light. And she had me do her interview at the place where she gave birth, which was Rashad's Community Birth Center. And that's how I met Rashad. And so it was just through this network of communities and relationships that I was building over those years from 2014 to 2016 that helped me make those introductions. And I like that I did it that way. It felt authentic and organic and real.
Hey, you're Elizabeth, you're mentioning characters that we didn't see in your clip. And I want to, is your film able for people to see your film? And will you put it in the chat, when it will be and how we can see it? St. June, can the open public still see your film? If you guys could add that to the chat, that would be great. Upcoming, Elizabeth, is that what
Yes, I can't type and talk at the same time. So I was like, oh, which one do I do? So I had an early version of chocolate milk that I made available to organizations around the country in 2019. It was an early rough cut where each woman's story was its own chapter. And we have since done a theatrical cut of the film that's a little bit more traditional, where you cut back and forth to their different stories. And we have got into a film festival. I've been submitting to festivals for the past year, and we're going to be, I believe our first screening will be at the Michaud Film Festival. But I have to make sure that doesn't disrupt premiere status, because there are a couple of other film festivals I got my eye on. I'm hoping to get into the Pan-African Film Festival as well. So, but yeah, please stay tuned, I guess is what I would say.
Okay, congratulations on that. And yeah, your subjects, you had some Tammy in particular, and some very intimate moments with her. I mean, her saying that, that her boyfriend and her broke up, like being alone. I really felt that about her. And that's something that I don't know, that came with time. Is that
Yeah, and I was so thankful that Tammy was willing to share those aspects of her, because your partner's support in your situation, that has a big role in what your birth experience is and your breastfeeding experience is. And when I would screen the rough cut of the film, I would see women tear up when they talked about how Tammy thought that it was going to work out. She didn't know that she was going to be a single parent. And those are part of this, that's part of the real life. And then the ending of the film, though, 5 years later, she does come full circle from feeling less alone and wanting to do it on her own, because she was upset that she didn't have the nuclear family that she envisioned. At the end, we do see that she is able to co-parent successfully with Rodney, and let go of some of those feelings that she had initially.
fantastic? In June, Wilhelmina, I'm always wanting an update about her family. Can I say, there's this woman, Wilhelmina is the main character of this documentary. She has so much going on in her life. She never swears. She does not curse. She doesn't appear to be angry ever. And she's like just a phenomenal woman.
She's phenomenal. Yeah, she did.
She's from the South, y'all. She's from the South.
She's from the South. Yeah, Williston, South Carolina. About a half hour outside Aiken. I was talking to her about a week ago, though, when she was talking about former Governor Nikki Haley, who's now running for president, and she did curse. In reference to like everybody's acting like this woman is some kind of saint because she like took down the Confederate flag, but there are all these other things she did. So yeah, no, Wilhelmina was amazing. And is amazing. And we sort of became like sisters, and she actually had no idea. I was just this person that would come to South Carolina about once a month with a camera and was shooting a story about her. And I had found her actually through Vivian Clark Armstead's group. It actually is a very long story. I started with a group called Sister Song, which is based in Atlanta. And I was interested in doing a film about reproductive justice issues and Black women. In the course of that, I ran across this statistic that HIV in 2013 was the largest killer of Black women in the South. And then I found the group in South Carolina that was working with people in rural South Carolina. Through them, they had published a newsletter, and Deschal, who was then 13, had written an article about what it was like to be 13 years old, growing up in a town of 1,500 people and being the only one in the town that anybody knew that was HIV positive. So she was like a tween trying to figure all this out. How do I date? How do I tell anybody? When do I tell them? How do I tell them? Wilhelmina had been very open about it. She wanted Deschal to be open about it. And as Deschelle got older, I mean, I did go through a period where I sort of wrestled with this, you know, when you're 13 and your grandmother says, we're going to do this film about you, fine. And then her mother died of HIV horribly in a nursing home. But then around the time she's like 15 or 16 years old, and, you know, she's like, I'm sure I want all my business out on the street like this, you know? And so, and oddly enough, the hardest scene to get with her was to get her taking her medication in the morning. I like, literally, it took me 2 years. This is like, Deschelle, I need to see the pills. I need to know what you're taking, because one of the issues had been that they hadn't tested HIV medication at that time on women, let alone Black women. And so we were having more adverse effects. And in one of the advocacy groups that I showed this to, when I brought that point up in the film, said, oh, well, you can't, it was like Elizabeth's experience with the formula, right? Yeah, you can't say that because then you're dissuading people from taking the pills. And I'm like, no, I'm making the point that the industry is not responsive to the needs of women, let alone Black women. And then shortly thereafter, she was taking like 5 pills, and then they were able to get her on a 1 pill a day regimen, and she has thrived on that. She's now married. She didn't marry the girl that she was dating in the film. She started another relationship and they got married about a year ago. So she's happily married now. She hasn't yet. I was just talking to her. She called me New Year's Day. And she now calls me her other mother. And she said, I said, so when are you going to stop working in that auto factory and go back and get that hair degree? Because she wanted to do hair. You know, and I'm like, you know, you need to like get off of the factory was like easy work, and she was struggling with getting the hair, whatever, the beautician's certificate or whatever she had to have in the state of South Carolina, you know. So I'm like, you know, Deschelle, go on, pursue that dream. Don't be afraid. You know, so she's 26, she's still working it out, you know. And they're both, you know, she's fine, you know, she's thriving.
I just really love, June, how you because sometimes with the documentary, things have already happened and people have to recount it. And I just love the animations that you use, like when she has, you know, explaining how she nursed this baby that no one thought was going to survive. Yeah. And then you're saying now that she's 26, and like, just a testament to Wilhelmina and Black women. And yeah.
I want to touch on the hospice care. And Jan, tell me if I'm wrong, because they've actually done narrative films of talking about the predatory nature of these kind of long-term facilities. I don't know if you got to see June's film, but Deschelle's mother goes into a hospice scenario and kind of signs away her checks, her Social Security or her checks. And these people like didn't think that she had any family, so they totally like take all her money. She can't, her mother can't get her out because she's kind of signed over herself. I'm like, this is a real thing that goes on where the state like just presumed her financials. That like blows my mind, and I don't think that was a one-time thing. I believe that is the system of some of these places.
I did not see June's film, so I can't really comment on what was in there. So that you would need June to comment on that. I did, or I can comment that once again, the healthcare system is a for-profit system, and that's a problem. That is absolutely a problem. And I can say that one of the issues that was highlighted or illustrated during this COVID fiasco was the state of nursing homes and and what was, how many people died in nursing homes, and how horrific some of those conditions are. So we have that challenge here in terms of how do we treat elders in a youth oriented country, or perhaps world.
Well, I think as a Western society and the Western values that we've adopted, I think have borne out that it doesn't work. How we treat our elderly, how we treat birthing families, and the over-reliance on the healthcare industrial complex. That's all I could think of when you were speaking, Jan, was, that system doesn't really work.
Yeah, it is not working for anyone, not simply just for Black women. I think though the thing that I was thinking about, just in terms of what I'm thinking about today, there is a Sunday night phone call called Win with Black Women, and it is put together by a sister named Joteka Edie. And she did a call out last month to say, could Black women buy out theaters for The Little Mermaid? And they bought out 100 theaters for The Little Mermaid opening weekend. And all throughout my social media feed, I saw lots of little Black girls dressed as mermaids, with popcorn going through the theater. This is the influence and the potential of filmmaking, right? Because just as much as we need to see our history, and as much as we need to see what is going on today with our lives, we also need to see ourselves in the future, and to see ourselves for all the potential that we can be, right? So I am going to say that I absolutely admire June and Elizabeth's ability to take that story and bring it to life on film, to get it from A to Z, because I know that is no easy feat. Not getting the money or securing the money to make it happen, or doing 40 interviews, or even following folks from age 13 to 26. That's commitment. And I absolutely admire the tenacity, resilience, and stick with itness that you all did in getting those films on screen, so that folks like Black Women for Wellness and our other community-based organizations could use those films as leverage to move policy, and that our community could use those films so they see themselves and they grow and they engage and they do better. Because we know that it is just not data and just not facts that move people, that we have to engage their hearts to move them. So kudos to y'all. And I got some films, some ideas for y'all to work on. And one of the sayings that one of my teachers gave to me popped into my head about, being executive director of a nonprofit, or even being a radio show host, as I was at one point in time, that I need to have the the skin of a rhinoceros, because you got to be able to take those no's and keep it moving. So it is unfortunate, but thank you all for making that happen.
That's one of the things. Oh, I'm sorry, that I wanted to just jump in. I mean, I think it's getting back to what Elizabeth said. Last year we showed Aftershock, the piece that Spike Lee's wife did about Black women and mortality. And so it's the question of, how, because I'm quite sure, white filmmakers, when they've made films about health issues and about, health in general, just, about their health issues, we see them getting Oscars and getting, these awards and getting, and they have more platforms. And I guess the question is, how can our own community help facilitate that, when we're talking, I'm just, since we're talking about Black women wellness, how can our community help us facilitate that our work or the work of documentary filmmakers is shown, especially when it's affecting us, that are shown, more readily, or that there's platforms, or that these films are seen more. How can that happen?
That's actually a great, I love that question because it segues to what I want to respond to Jan with. First, I can't take credit for finishing the film. All of that is from the community. If I hadn't had them saying, we can't wait to see the film, we're looking forward to it, like, I didn't want to let them down. Because there are definitely times where I wanted to take my hard drives to June and throw them in the LA River or the Pacific. I was just like, this is so hard. No one gets what I'm trying to do. But all the women that I met around the country who were excited to see themselves on screen, like, that's the only reason I was able to continue and finish. And with what you were saying, Joyce, is like, my film would not have the legs that it had if it weren't for organizations like Jan's, where they're excited to have the content and they're excited to do the work to organize a private community screening. I have to say that for the film festivals, a private community screening, so that the audiences, for the families that the film is made, that I made the film for, they get to see it. They get to have those conversations. And so what I wanted to mention earlier is, like, I made a discussion guide. I made little flyers about how to find partners to help you find the location or a conference room or a theater to screen the film. Like, I made little tip sheets to make it easy for organizations to screen my film. And that was the most exciting thing, was that I didn't have to wait for a Netflix or a Hulu or HBO Max or Sundance or anyone to recognize my film. I could go directly to our community, and the organizations were happy to have those private community screenings. And being able to sit in some of those audiences and look at people's faces and see their reactions in real time to the, seeing themselves on screen, like that, that's what made it possible for me to keep going on this journey.
I mean, I think the Black Film, Pan-African Film Festival, Real Sisters, Urban Film Festival, Atlanta has a Black Arts Festival every year. I mean, I think to the degree that we can make sure that we're entering our films, those of us that are making them there. I saw a headline the other day, Tubi TV, Tubi TV, one of the streamers.
Oh,
become a home for a lot of independent filmmakers, and we should definitely be hit. It's free. It's the only, like, you don't have to pay a monthly fee. It's just Tubi TV. It's on your streamer already. It's free. You can go there, and they're looking for content. So that would be another place that I would tell people who are working on a film now, that are trying to find a home for it. Outside of the festival circuit, because only how many of us go to film festivals, right? Yeah.
Very, very good. Great conversation. So good. I am encouraged. It's hearing these stories about struggle making your film, but the feeling need that you have to keep going on, like you're being accountable by your community, Elizabeth. Like I love these chats just for my personal gratification too. I want to say thank you all. I feel like we did that. We got in some good work about Black women wellness. Jan, thank you so much for the work that you do. Can we all please stay in touch and build this community? And I want to say thank you. Let's I know we're all being recorded, but I'm going to do a BADWEST a BADWEST screenshot for us all. So thank you from IDA. Keisha was fabulous. Thank you, Sergio. Thank you, Taylor, Naomi. Thank you, audience. Thank you, Joyce. And yeah, I want to invite you all to Monday, June 26th. We do a fourth Monday screenings, and we're actually showing like 3 shorts about mental health, including Deborah Wilson's film, The Lucky One. So badwest.org for more information. Appreciate you all. And yeah, we'll see you. We'll email you all.
Okay.
Have a good rest of your day.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. And I dropped our website into the chat.
Fantastic. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, June.